Hi, hello. You're welcome to my podcast. My name is Anu Martins, and I'm happy to be here. I'm grateful for your time and your attention. Attention is like gold, like what gold used to be back in the day. Um, and on this podcast, my hope is that, and my intention is to make it worth your while. So we talk about infertility. From all the myriad of possible perspectives. And today we'll be talking about it from a male perspective. And I think maybe more from a male partner perspective as opposed to just male. But we can mix it up because of the nature of, fertility challenges and what have you, because the woman is the one who carries a lot of focus is on the woman. But for infertility from a clinical perspective, what the research has shown is that what we call female infertility, where it's really because there's something wrong with the female reproductive system, accounts for 40% of infertility cases, where it's male infertility, where it's mostly the issue is mostly with the male reproductive system or with the male partner, it's also 40%. Then 10% of infertility cases that have been diagnosed is from a combined factor of male and female. And then the other 10% is unexplained. So male infertility is a large chunk of the infertility story, even though it doesn't seem that way, which is kind of interesting. And what I found as a woman, I've heard a few stories, I've heard their perspective, I've heard the perspective from a few friends, and it's been very enlightening. So I have a friend, for example, who he's the person that talked about the fact that it was male factor infertility. Well, it was combined actually. So there was male factor infertility, there was female factor infertility, and the emotions that triggered in him, how he felt, because it was like a dual role where, as a husband and a father, because in their case it was secondary infertility, which we can talk about in another episode. So as a husband and a father, he felt the burden of responsibility to support his wife, especially from a cultural perspective. The pressure always seems to be on the wife. But at the same time, being true to himself and being true to his wife, knowing that there was male factor. So one of the ways, there's male factor infertility is it's quite straightforward for men, where there's a semen analysis done. And when a semen analysis is done, what is being checked for is the healthiness of the sperm, the motility, that is how it moves and how fast it moves, the morphology, which is what it looks like. Are these normal sperm cells or are they abnormal? What percentage of normal do you have? And then the density, because you must have a certain number of million sperm cells before the probability and the possibility of impregnating, a woman is at a certain threshold. So clearly he had done this assessment and he knew that his sperm count wasn't so great, and he was a contributing factor to that. So it was almost like, for him, almost like a double whammy, where I myself am infertile, so to speak, and so is my wife. And so the guilt, the heaviness of the burden, I don't know if it's really guilt, but I guess that's perception, but just that the heaviness of that burden weighed on him. And this is a guy who, the very happy-go-lucky, cheerful, has a very cheerful persona. So, and the stereotypical man doesn't share his. So you would, if he didn't share what he was going through and how he felt, you would never guess. So that was very enlightening. Then another person who I've had an in-depth discussion with wasn't so much. To be honest, it was hard to tell if he was talking about himself in parables, or because we kept talking about when it's a man, not necessarily that it was him. And the cultural impact. So for him, his story was more around protecting his wife from external forces, external forces being extended family and their pressures, and how they inadvertently put pressure on the woman, and they're facing the woman and asking the woman questions, at family gatherings, or when they're calling him and referring to his wife. And for him, it's like, why do you think it's my wife? How do you know it's not me? Or how do you know it's not both of us? And getting that, pushback and that flabbergasted, like, how could you even suggest it's you? And but he's very progressive thinking. He's like, no, challenging the norm. Like, look, there's no way you would know if you don't know. So from that cultural perspective, he had that, and that the impact on the family, he had that, battle to fight, and and it was very interesting at the time for me to learn, to sort of try and see something from the man's angle and from this kind of man in this context. So I wouldn't presume to know what men think. I'm only privy to the, those that have shared with me personally. But one thing I do know, generally speaking, is that men don't necessarily share, especially for things like this that are so deep. So it would be interesting to read in the comments, or, to know what your thoughts are, either as a person as a man going through infertility, or as someone who knows a man who's going through it, what you think, how you approach the issue. One thing that I for me personally, that comes through is how practical, because men generally seem to be geared towards, okay, there's a problem, how do we fix it, and whatever the context of that case may be, what you find generally for infertility is the men generally feel like, well, from what I know, I could be wrong, you could probably be wrong, but I think generally speaking, there's that they don't know what to do. If it's a DIY in the house, get their hammer and their toolbox. If it's a career thing, okay, they strategize. If it's a financial thing, okay, what do we do? How do we, overcome this? How do we get the money in? What do we need to change? But for infertility, and for trying to get pregnant or trying to, it just seems like it's because it's a lot of it happens in the body of the woman, even if they are a contributing factor. It just seems completely out of their hands. I think they feel like it's completely out of their hands, and they feel helpless. And it's that helpless feeling that is so difficult to overcome. So I guess this episode is me, talking about the stories I've heard, a few of them, and also kind of questioning what you have gone through, what tips, you would give, or what context you had. And I think mostly, if I were to summarize, this really is to shine a light on the fact that men are also affected by infertility. We seem to forget collectively. We seem to overlook them collectively. They seem to be them, but they're not apart from this. They're part of the story. Because if we go back again, the episode where we talked about, how to define infertility, and we used the WHO definition, and we talked about the reproductive system, the disease of the reproductive system, in which there's a failure to conceive. And we know that traditionally speaking, it usually takes both the male and the female. So, and if we're saying that in terms of the data, make a 40% contribution in terms of male factor infertility, then we do need to raise the awareness. We do need to hear what they're going through, how they feel. We do need to be more inclusive in our discourse, in our approach, from all the different perspectives, and be intentional. We need to be intentional about including men in the discussions. So this is sort of also an invitation to the men. Let's hear from you. Let's collectively destigmatize this. The male stigma for regarding fertility seems to be higher, especially in certain cultures. So let's break all of that together and talk about it and see how we can support each other as we go through this journey. And I think that's the discussion for this episode. And I hope it got you thinking differently and raised your awareness, regarding male infertility. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.